Okay, cool. So this is Professor Noor, my Bio 202 teacher, and I guess wanted to first get your opinion on the flipped class format in general.
Okay, so I should tell you right off the bat that I've only done this once, and we haven't even completed that semester.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm far from an expert on the flipped class format. But so what I guess do you want me to talk about like what we actually do, or my opinions of it?
Sure. I guess first the general structure of the class,
Sure.
how that works.
Okay, so with my class, so this is an Introduction to Genetics and Evolution class, as you know very well. Students are assigned prior to the class period to watch a set of videos, usually 2 or 3 videos that are maybe 15 minutes on average in length. Following that, they complete a pre-lecture quiz, which was designed partly to help them assess how well they understood the material, but probably also to give me feedback. The last question on the quiz is, what did you find interesting or confusing in the online lecture? In the class period, so I look over the responses to the pre-class quiz each night before the lecture. So then I make slides directly in response to those that night before. So, for example, several people said I didn't understand Hardy-Weinberg, or one of the topics that was discussed. I'll then, for the beginning of class, design a set of slides to go over it a slightly different way than was gone over in the lecture, to try to fill in, well, here's something that numerous people said they didn't really get. So that's the confusing aspect. Most of the class period is, the students have a sheet of paper that they printed out that I've put online as well. Usually has somewhere between 6 and 10 questions, something like that, that are free response, that solve this kind of problem, try to interpret this experimental result or something like that. So they can work on their own, or they can work in pairs or anything like that, and basically try to solve these things. I'm walking around the room. We have 19 TAs associated with the class. Usually most of them are there, not quite all. We're all walking around the room, and we come up to students individually and say, hey, are you stuck on number 1? Can I help you in some way, or do you need any help? And sometimes they do. Sometimes they're just like, no, I'm good, and they're just plugging along. So it's a little bit more interactive during the class period. Following that, I then go over the correct answers to the in-class problems. So these weren't graded. This is just purely for practice. And then the last piece of the class is usually, again, slightly based on what people submitted as what was something people found interesting. I'll try to make slides based on that, or if it was pretty spread out, maybe I'll just pick something that I thought was interesting that wasn't really covered in the online lectures. So taking it a step further, often associated with current research or some just broadly interesting finding. So that's the format as it's laid out.
So I guess in comparison to the class you taught before,
yes.
How did the traditional format look? Was it just like straight lecture and
Great
then
question.
people did homework?
So what happened in the previous one, there was still a pre-class quiz, but it was based on reading. The pre-class quiz was basically just to make sure people actually looked at the reading, but the class, barely assumed that. I mean, a lot of students commented that they could essentially skip the reading, figure out the answers to the pre-class quiz, just come in and then come in and get what they needed from lecture. The lecture period was standard information transmission. It's basically the same content that I now have in the videos ahead of time. That basically is what used to happen during the class period. The interaction level was basically 0. Maybe I'd take 1 or 2 quick questions during the class period, but that would be it. So with the new format, that basic content transmission is shifted outside the class period, and instead the class period is more devoted to reinforcement rather than basic content transmission.
So would you say at this point, because I know I asked you previously, earlier in the semester, did you like the flipped class format? Have you come to a decision now? As a teacher?
I personally do. Now, the things I like about it are, first of all, it gives me a lot more opportunities to talk to students in the class. And as I'm walking around the room, I get to talk to, yes, obviously not everybody. I mean, it's a big class. There's 400 some enrolled, though it's rare that we have more than 200 in the room, I think. But I do get to talk to every class period, something like 20 or 30 students in the class, and that would absolutely not have happened the other one. And I like that because they can ask me direct questions about the material, sometimes about the problems they're working on, but sometimes when I walk around, they say, well, I don't have a question about this, but can I ask you something unrelated? And I'm very happy to do that. I think that's fantastic, and that's part of what I get joy from teaching, and it helps with bettering their understanding of the material. So that part I like. The other thing I like is it's very clear to me talking to the students who show up for a class, and that's not 100%, we can come back to that. For the students who show up to class, it's unambiguous that their understanding of the material is dramatically higher than the people from last year. Because the kinds of questions I get now are much higher level questions. They're not the very, very basic, well, I didn't get blah, something that was, essentially just covered and they just missed it or something like that. That doesn't happen. I mean, it still happens a little bit, but not nearly as much. Now I get a lot of higher level questions, so I think people really, really get it in a deep way they didn't understand before. So that to me is also a big plus. There are minuses. I mean, the biggest minus is, you know, a lot of students, first of all, a lot of students just don't like it. They're not used to it. It unambiguously requires a lot more outside of class time because, like I said, a lot of people before were just blowing off the reading. They just guessed and figure it out because, again, you had 4 shots on the pre-lecture quiz. You could probably just guess and get them and then be done and move on from there. Now they really have to, before coming to class, they have to watch a long set of videos. I mean, it's something like 45 minutes for each class. They have to really get the material. They can't have just sort of passingly watched it while they're watching a basketball game or something like that. They have to really watch it in order to be able to then solve problems in class to get the maximum benefit out of it. So that is a big hurdle for a subset of students where they're not able or willing or something to invest that much effort. So I mean, for the subset who go through and do everything, they're coming out with like amazingly good understanding. There's a subset who either don't want to do that or don't like doing that, and they're not coming away with as much. And the final thing related to that, it's funny to me, I don't really understand why this is the case. I think it's just a psychological thing. The enrollment's actually now lower than it was before, even though in my opinion there's actually more reason to go to class now than there was before. Because before it was the basic content transmission, but the class was recorded so you could just watch it afterwards anyway. Right. But now actually it's something new and it's a reinforcement and it's active, but our enrollment's actually slightly lower. So I think it's because people perceive it as, well, I got the basic content so I don't need any reinforcement. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I mean, on average, class grades are higher, so I think, on average, people are doing better. But there are some people who definitely are not doing well. And I have no way of testing this because I don't in any way take attendance or anything like that. But my strong suspicion is there's a correlation between coming to class and your grade.
Yeah. I guess like from some studies I've read, like through papers on like the flipped class formats, like a lot of them have said that class attendance or enrollment has like increased, but they didn't know like specific reasons why. And I guess this would just be a case where it decreased. I guess I know a lot of like friends will be like, well, first of all, it's 8:45, so they'll be like, we could just watch like the lectures.
It was 8:30 before.
Yeah.
So it was worse.
I'm not sure about that question. Do you have any like specific solutions?
So with the traditional flipped class format, what you're supposed to do, and I haven't done this, and that might be why the attendance is higher for the other ones. The traditional flipped class format, you're supposed to actually have some grade coming from the work that's done in class. Okay. I've actually avoided that because of the class size. I mean, I think just the logistics of it, the number of people who have, model UN, swim team, I'm in band, I'm in blah. I mean, it's just going to be this logistical nightmare that for literally every single day to figure out, was this a good enough excuse or not? That your brother's getting married, is that a good enough excuse for you being there or not? That your roommate threw up on you, I don't know. Just the logistics of it would just be horrible. So that's the reason I've avoided that.
To the question, like, do you think there's an ideal or target class size for the flipped class format?
I think it certainly works best for smaller classes. I mean, it's basically what, if you think of it, that's essentially what literature class has been doing all along, right? That,
classes.
Exactly, like you read this book and you come to class and you talk about the book. That's basically what you do, right? So we're in some sense late in the game. We're not standing up there reading the book to you.
But I guess the obstacle for many science classes, or at least introductory science classes, is that it's going to be big lectures.
Exactly.
But I guess a lot of times when you do get to the higher level science classes, I feel like it's more discussion based.
It is more discussion based.
So I feel like...
And there's some material that's more predisposed to it than others. So for example, the first part of the semester that we had was largely very problem based in the sense of like figure out recombination fraction, figure out associations, solve for heritability. It's very problem based. It's very well suited for that format. Now, actually, the things we're having, I actually had a much harder time coming up with thoughtful problems for more just purely concept-based things. It's hard. I mean, obviously you can do it. That's, again, what the humanities have been doing all along, but it's definitely much harder. It works very well for the problem-based ones, though, because, people just need practice doing it. It's very easy to come up with an infinite number of problems, so you can apply it very easily. In terms of applying it, I mean, I'm going to actually talk to the class at the end of the class and see what ideas people have. One thing I was thinking about doing is having it so there is some in-class activities that are graded, but making it so it's literally something like you can drop your lowest 2/3. And then at that point just saying, but no excuses. That if you're going for Model UN or whatever, take it out of the 2/3.
So like, I know like I took a class at a local university back home, and they include like clickers.
Yeah.
I don't like those are automatically like attendance, but I'm not sure like if you ever thought about, because right now we use texting. In class
Exactly. I mean the problem. I mean the good thing about clickers is you can do exactly that. The downside is
money.
You're forcing everybody to buy it, or you're making the university buy it, and the university won't buy it. So.
Oh.
Yeah, there was one semester biology 201. This is back when it was 101. Actually required the clickers, and oh my gosh, you'd think that everybody was being bled out of the start of class. It was definitely not popular by far. So I would avoid it for that reason. But like I said, I'm thinking about doing something maybe next year. I'm not sure yet. Something next year where maybe it's literally like you're graded, but you can drop your lowest 2/3. So the idea there isn't. At some level, I don't care if people come to class or not, right? I mean, you're all adults. If you want to show up, if you want the benefit, great. If you're like, well, I want to waste the money, then do what you want to do. Or maybe in some cases, some people, especially beginning of the semester, they've already had the material in AP biology. If they fully get it, fine, don't come. But what I worry about is, especially in the beginning of the semester, people get in the habit of not coming because it is something they had in AP biology, and then at that point, they just, they basically just get out of the routine of ever coming. And they essentially lose the benefit when we get into concepts they haven't had before. So what the idea of that drop 2/3 thing is basically get it so people do show up sometimes, and hopefully, I mean, my hope is that they'll actually see a benefit from it. That this actually really is helping me, and then they'll come, a little bit more often when it actually is helpful for them. So again, I don't want to just force. I mean, if I want to just force everybody to come, I could just say we'll have a quiz every day. But I don't want to do that. I mean, that's the wrong reason for people to come. The reason I want people to come is because I want them to decide on their own that this was to their own benefit for coming. Now, part of that's on me. I have to make sure the activities are beneficial, that they have to lend to better understanding of the material, and B, they have to lend to better performance on the tests. Because those are the two reasons people come. They want to understand the material, and they want to do better on the tests. So, I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to come up with activities along those lines, and I try to gear the tests so they are very much built upon those kinds of activities. So that way, then there is value to coming. It's not just an imposition.
So like based on like how you're speaking, like are you going to continue with the flipped class format in the future, and like how long do you foresee?
Yeah, the danger.
This format?
So the tricky thing with me is it would be very difficult for me not to do it. The reason is because the online lectures are available freely in Coursera. So if I was to not do a flipped class format, then literally all I would be delivering in class is something that anybody anywhere could get anytime for free. That would probably not go over well, right? So at some level, I'm kind of locked in where I almost have to do the flipped class or cancel the Coursera class, one or the other. Because if I do a standard class, if I do basically exactly the same lectures that are available in Coursera live, there really is no benefit to coming to class. That would be a total waste for everybody. So I'm kind of locked in that regard. But what I need to do is try to figure out how to make it as advantageous as possible for everybody.
Right.
I mean, and it's tricky. There are some people who I know really hate it, but the problem is I have a very hard time extracting from that subset of the class why it is they
have you actually talked to like in specific individuals that really dislike it?
That's the problem.
I feel like it's a minority.
It is a minority. I agree. Okay. But I don't. The issues, like for example, on there were in the latest issue of Tower View, which is actually right here. Latest issue of Tower View. There was an article about the flipped class format in my class, and on the online comments, somebody said, "Well, the class really sucks." But that's all they said. They didn't say, "I find the activities in the class period to be not helpful for my understanding." There was nothing. It just sucks. It's like, well, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, I can't solve sucks except for like exhaling, So I'm really hoping that in the formal class evaluations, which we'll be doing soon, the subset who don't like it, I think you're right. I think the majority of class does like it, or at least is neutral on it. But I'm hoping the subset who doesn't like it will really elaborate why they don't like it. Because some of the things that people said, we had a mid-semester evaluation, and people had some comments in there who disliked it. And they said things like, I like taking notes on a lecture, which
you can still take notes.
That's exactly it. I don't understand. Like, well, I don't see why you're prevented from doing it with this format. So I mean, there were a lot of comments like that, which I didn't understand. And it would be helpful more as a conversation for me to say, well, why is it you can't do that with the current format? And not to corner them, and not to tell them they're wrong, because I mean, maybe they do have a reason. Maybe my guess, and this is just a total guess, that for a subset of people, it's harder to sit down and focus on a video that's playing and really assimilate everything that's coming off it as compared to a lecture.
Then again, you think like 45 minutes per like every 2 nights compared to another course where you have a textbook reading is about the same or even less.
Exactly,
so.
Exactly. And honestly too, with, I mean, the advantage of having it from the pre-record lectures, you can do it at double speed if you fully are getting it. You can do it at half speed. You can rewind or replay. It seems like that's tremendously better than doing it live, where I missed the word he said and it's gone. Right? So I mean, from my perspective, it seems like that wouldn't be, but I can understand. Maybe some people just really hate like taking notes off a screen. I mean, that's possible. But I don't know. I mean, what I really, really hope to get this semester is as much feedback as possible, both from the people who liked it. Like, what are the things they really liked? So I make sure I don't mess those things up. What I'd hate to do is respond to the minority and piss off the majority. That would be very destructive. But I'm hoping to get very, very detailed comments back from the subject who don't like it about why they don't like it. I think you're right. I think timing-wise, I think it is a little bit more of an investment, but not much, because the class used to be an hour 15 3 times a week. I shortened it to 45, so that's taking off a little bit of time there. And my guess is people just don't have to study as much, because I mean, you basically have studied every time you come to class. So I think in the end, the investment, it's probably a little bit more, but it's not dramatically more. But hopefully, again, it's translating to better performance, which I assume is what everybody wants. Better understanding, better performance. So I don't know.
So you talked a little about like the teacher-student interaction and maybe not so student-student interaction.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little more, like how that dynamic changes, or like
that's a great question.
How like that changes?
So with the traditional class, there's like basically no student-student interaction. I mean, the people might chat a little bit, or they might say, "Did you catch what he just said?" Or I mean, that's kind of the extent of it right there. With this, the way I'm doing it, at least, there's opportunity but no mandate, and that's different from the traditional flipped class. There's opportunity but no mandate, in that if you want to come in, if you want to interact with students, you can sit down next to somebody and and work out all these problems together and say, hey, I don't really get how to do this. And I hear this too as I'm walking around the room, that people will be debating it. I love it. I love hearing. I mean, that makes me really happy when I hear people debating some topic, because I know that they're really, really getting it by the end. So that's fantastic. Even if they get the wrong answer, they will really, really understand better, because they'll understand how they came to X conclusion and what the correct conclusion was. So I love that. Now with the traditional flip class, the teacher is supposed to assign groups at random, and you're supposed to have things graded such that like there's an individual grade and there's a group grade and things like that, and then you take the average of the two and things like that. Again, with a huge class, oh my gosh, that would be horrible if I did that to people. I think there would be a revolt. But that is what you're supposed to do. I mean, I'm supposed to just randomly assign groups of 4, and basically responsible to each other at some level. So.
And then what about the teacher-student relationship, I guess?
I love it.
Okay.
I mean, again,
do you feel like your ability to get to know the students and build like a relationship, which is really important, is limited because of the class size? To some extent, I guess.
Well, certainly because of the class size. Yeah. There's 2 things. There's the class size, and there's also the class attendance, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, of the people who come to class and and participate, I definitely know them far better than in the traditional format. Because now I know, like, even the kinds of questions people ask and things like that. I mean, I can point at people in the room and say, oh, that's the person who never gets this kind of thing. But they're always, but they're really good at why kind of thing, things like that. And especially the people who sit on the aisles, people who sit dead center in the auditorium. It's kind of hard to get at them. What was the other part? I forget.
Basically just like, just to elaborate a little more on the teacher-student interaction.
Yeah. I was going to say something else related to that. So I definitely get to know a lot of students. Oh yeah, that's right. The problem is, of course, there's that, given that we have a significant fraction of the class who comes, less frequently than once a week. That subset, I don't know. I mean, I do try to walk through, as you know, I try to walk through the lab sections. But I mean, that's not an opportunity to really get to know people. That's the quick, hey, do you have any questions? Which the vast majority of people say no when I ask them, but at least there's an opportunity there for some sort of interaction. That's true both with the flipped and the non-flipped class, because I used to do that last year as well. But now I feel like when I'm walking through the class, I actually know some of these people a little bit better. I actually know more people by name. I know a little bit more about like where they're from, what they do, and things like that. So I really like it. I really like that piece to it. I'm really hoping that most of the class by the end will be happy that we did it this way. I mean, this is the thing it literally keeps me up at night. I kind of stress about, and this is why I've been so stressed about people's performance in the class, because it was my decision to switch from the standard format to the flip format, and I would be really hurt and upset if a large fraction of the class felt that I screwed them over by making that change. Because I took something, it's not like my previous class wasn't working. It seemed like it was working fine. Yeah. But the idea was that this is an opportunity for it to work even better. And it was a risk. And I think it still is a risk. I think overall, I'm not willing to declare victory yet, but overall, I think the answer is yes. I think it has worked better. I think, again, given student performance, things like that. But again, there's definitely a subset of students who are just not happy with it. I think it's minority, but a subset.
And we've already had, I guess, 2 midterms
Yes.
at this point, and could
Both
you just
cases.
talk about, like,
Sure.
I guess, what it was last year compared to what it is now?
Sure. For the first midterm, there was a significant improvement. It was fairly dramatic. I think it was actually this was the highest midterm average I've ever seen in my entire career. So that was phenomenal. Following test 1, attendance dropped. I think there was multiple issues, but one of them was that one of them was middle of the semester. There's more things going on. The other one is I think there was a little bit of overconfidence. So I tried emailing the class and telling people individually multiple times, like, really be aware. Test 2 is a lot harder because test 1, most people have had that material in high school, especially if they had AP. Test 2 material, nobody has had in high school, or at least most of it have not had in high school. So it's significantly harder. The test 2 performance was slightly better than last year's. It was not statistically significant by any means. But
it wasn't?
No, but it was slightly higher than last year's.
Okay.
So that, there's something there. Though again, I mean, what the flipped classroom essentially does is it sets up the opportunities for people to have tons more reinforcement. But it's up to the students to say, like, I'm willing to take this, I think this is worth it, or they're going to say, I know the opportunity's there, but I'm just not going to bother.
Yeah. I guess at least studying for the second midterm, I think my problem was that I studied way too far in advance because I had all the materials already.
Yeah.
So then I probably forgot some things. Like if I took it 2 weeks before, I probably would have
done better. Yeah,
than if I took it 2 weeks after.
Yeah, the timing of that wasn't good. The other thing I realized after the fact, but it was too late, when I realized it, is that we actually had test 2 just after the withdraw date.
Oh.
And there are a few people who actually who got Fs on the first test and they got Fs on the second test. They're like, well, I'm going to withdraw, and they actually can't. I didn't even notice that. I mean, I assumed the withdrawal date was in April, but that was my fault.
Yeah.
I just can't think if they wanted to sign the withdrawal, I'd be willing to sign it because that was my fault. I should have had test 2 earlier.
I guess, what advice do you have for other like STEM, like science, technology, engineering, math teachers who are trying to implement this at Duke and I guess in the nation?
Well, I'm going to give 2 pieces of contradictory advice.
Okay.
One of them is do prepare your own online lectures if you're going to do it. Because what a lot of people do is they just use a standard, oh, I found something on the web, this lecture is pretty good, I'll use that and I'll do a flipped class off that. You can do that. The negative that has is the same negative that every class has that uses a textbook. So if I was to assign, for example, read chapter 6 of the textbook, there's probably, in reality, 10 to 20% of that chapter that I actually care about you knowing.
Yeah.
But by assigning you the whole chapter, you have to wade through that, the other 80 to 90% to get that 10%. And that is challenging for students. And that's why students typically hate being assigned to read something from the textbook, because they're like, I read all this stuff and there was only this one piece that they cared about. Right. If you do your own thing, what you give to the students is exactly what you want them to know.
Expect them to know.
Exactly. So that's a big advantage. Now, the part where I'm going to contradict it is that was a huge amount of work putting that together. Oh my gosh, it was literally something on the order of about 20 to 25 hours a week for a month and a half to prepare those videos. So that was, to figure them out, do all the copyright stuff, and I even had help on it too. It wasn't just me doing it solo. That was a pain in the butt. I'm so glad it's done, but.
Is that only for the first time? Like, you'll be using these videos, I assume, again?
Each time I'm editing them a little bit and adding a little bit more. So in the online class in fall, it didn't have the videos on sexual selection. I made them over Christmas break. I also did a lot of, editing and things like that of, oh, okay, this wasn't exactly right. Or, oh, there's a new study that changes this thing I said before. And I actually have a list right now of here's a bunch of things I want to change. So one thing I'm going to do, for example, I'm going to record my own phylogenetics lecture rather than having a guest lecture for next year. So I'm going to do that over summer, and there's several other little things that need updating. So I have a file that I keep on my computer. Here's all the stuff I need to fix. So, but it's certainly not nearly the same upfront effort. It's probably 20 hours months instead of 20 hours for weeks and weeks.
That's true. I guess those are all the specific questions I had.
Okay.
Are there any other things that you wanted to add about the flipped class format?
Again, I've really enjoyed it, but I'm still very stressed about it.
It does put a lot of the burden on the teacher, I know.
It does. It makes it a lot more responsive.
Stress, students taking initiative about their learning, but teachers have a big responsibility.
Exactly. And and a lot of the onus is on me too, in the sense that what I feel is that I need to make activities that make it so it's worth coming to class, to make it so that there actually is some benefit to being at Duke as opposed to being one of the online students. And That's really hard to do. But I'm hoping I can get as much feedback as possible to do it better next year than this year even. So.
Right. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking with you.
Yep.
I am really stressed about it.